Well, hello and welcome to a Saturday conversation with David Rothkopf, who I've been trying to connect with all week. Finally caught up with him on Friday afternoon. Lots of important issues to discuss with him, from the Supreme Court to Bibi Netanyahu in Israel to what's happening on Ukraine funding and more. Always great to talk with David Rothkopf, one of the smartest, most well-connected, experienced, credible sources and voices I know. You can listen to him and his whole team at Deep State Radio. Go subscribe to Deep State Radio right now. There's links in the show notes. They have a great new show with former Washington Post writer, one of the smartest guys in all politics, Greg Sargent. You're going to want to check that out and everything else that Rothkopf is doing. This conversation pretty much starts when he showed up. And it's just us shooting the shit and busting chops at the beginning. And then for some reason I asked him about his relationship with his dad, who was a Holocaust survivor, actually left Austria when he was 13. It's pretty interesting and important and relevant. So I left it all in for you. Here we go. It's time for another great conversations with one of my favorite people to talk to, David Rothkopf. Oh boy, there he is.
Hey, nice welcome. I feel great. Thank you.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
There's a guy.
This again?
Oh, this guy.
Yeah.
Here's my favorite guy to talk to.
Yeah.
Did you have a good relationship with your dad?
Yeah, I did.
What would you say about it?
Just a great guy, you know?
Yeah. What did he do?
He was a scientist at Bell Telephone Laboratories. He researched how the brain works. What
was he like as a dad? Like, doesn't that make him understand everything about psychology to a certain extent? So he can.
Well, he was a psychologist. I guess it did. He was busy, and he was, he's the Holocaust survivor, escaped the Holocaust. So
your dad did?
Yeah.
As a child?
Yeah.
How old was he? Where have you told that story?
I've told it. 13 years old. Escaped in 1939. Came out of Vienna, Austria. They crossed the border from Austria into Italy, I guess, just an hour after there had been an assassination attempt on Hitler. And so the border was closed right after that. 40 members of his family were killed by the Nazis. And he and his parents made it out by the skin of their teeth, took a boat to the United States. He was given a suit. First time he'd ever had a suit to ride on the boat. And it was made out of cellulose, which is like sawdust, essentially. And so the first time it got hit by water, it shrunk right up.
Oh my gosh!
And he, came to the United States.
Why was it important to arrive in a suit?
Well, I think they felt that you had to travel in a distinguished way. They were extremely poor. I mean, so poor that the only assets they had were, I think, 3 gold rings that my grandmother ever wore, and my grandfather hid them he hollowed out the back of a clothing brush and hid them in there, and they made their way across Italy on foot and ate raw, unripe fruit in orchards till they got to the boat.
Jesus, what a journey. That's just one family.
Just one family, and then they moved to Danbury, Connecticut.
Oh, is that where they settled?
Yeah. Well, my grandfather had a brother who was smart enough to have come over many years earlier, who had a grocery store there.
Ah, wow.
And he was the one who, the U.S. had a quota and they couldn't get in. And the legend has it, there's no detail, that the only way that they could get a visa was for him to pay off a United States senator.
Wow. Well, he should have come the legal way.
Yeah.
Why didn't he follow why not, like my family came the legal way? Legally.
Did they? Well, they were not letting Jews in.
Oh.
And so they took whatever way they could get to get into the United States.
It just drives me nuts. Why don't they just come in the legal way?
Yeah, well,
They say that all the time now. Did your dad talk about that to you?
Not a heck of a lot. lot. He didn't talk a lot about the Holocaust and all his lost relatives. And then when he got to be much older, every year on December 9th, at the anniversary of Kristallnacht, he would send us a note saying, he'd never forget. Sometimes it just said never forget. And other times it would be like, here is a list of the names of all of your dead relatives.
Wow. That's powerful.
My father would on Mischief Night, because every year we grew up in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, and then moved to Summit when I was, I think, 12. But every year on Mischief Night, some warm neighbor would draw swastikas on our driveway.
You misled me there.
Did not resonate with my dad, given his history. No. So, in a weird little, I don't even know what makes a person do this. But I remember one year he got like a couple of chairs and some string and some stuff he brought from his lab. And he set up a perimeter with a tripwire. And on each one of the chairs, he put a strobe light, so that if somebody walked onto our property on Mischief Night, these lights started flashing. And he only did it 1 year, but it left an impression on me.
Yeah, it was a regular MacGyver. Real smart cat.
He was a brilliant man. He was a brilliant scientist. He did a lot of work, and that ultimately led to AI, but it was a long time before anybody called it that.
Really? Oh.
And AI, neuroscience, that kind of thing.
To think.
Well, he was one of a billion, but he was a smart guy.
All right, well, I have some current events to talk to you about.
Okay.
First of all, are congressional Republicans going to go around the Speaker of the House and bring Ukraine funding to the floor? How likely is that?
Well, I mean, from what I can tell, it looks like they're considering it. I half think, and nobody's told this to me explicitly, but I half think that that's what Mike Johnson would like. I think he was in this meeting with the president, Schumer, Jeffries, McConnell.
Was McConnell there? I thought McConnell didn't show up.
Oh, didn't he? I thought he did.
I think he might. I saw a picture of him with the VP, Kamala Harris, your good friend, of course, the president, and Schumer, just the four of them. But maybe there was a different meeting. But anyway, he was there.
I don't know. No, maybe McConnell wasn't. But whoever was in the meeting, I thought McConnell was. They all sort of turned their attention to Johnson and essentially said, if we don't come up with this money, we're going to lose. And it's going to be on you, buddy. And Schumer said it was the most intense meeting he'd ever been in of that sort. And
when he said we are going to lose, he meant Ukraine.
U.S., Ukraine. Yeah. I mean, our interests would be undermined. And
I saw what's his name? Chris Murphy. You're probably good friends with him. Senator Chris Murphy in Connecticut. Probably hang out with him.
I know him. He's
probably
a
members
guy.
of the club or something that you go to. But
the secret club.
I heard him saying this long, passionate soliloquy is always great. And at the end of it, he said, if this is all on Mike Johnson, the war is on Mike Johnson. It was like a tremendous amount. I really thought about how weighty it is for a U.S. senator to say it.
But here's the reality. Everybody knows that 2/3 of the people in the House, including a bunch of Republicans, would vote for aid to Ukraine. That it is being stopped by the MAGA ones, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said she will she will get Mike Johnson kicked out if he supports this. And
doesn't seem too hard. It only takes one person.
Oh, it doesn't. They only have a majority now. What, of 2 people, 3 people? But in any event, so I think for Johnson, the ideal thing is to have some Republican, quote, go rogue with a wink and a nod.
Right.
Get the vote to the floor, get it passed, have Johnson have some kind of deniability. I didn't know that was happening. And get it done. But, that's...
What does the funding mean? You've seen, obviously, you're closely watching and talking with people, foreign policy expert on the conflict. You've seen what's gone on with Navalny over the last, his death. And, of course, the Russians coming out in droves and supporting him, and all those that were too afraid to come out. It's pretty interesting numbers. But what do you think is happening there? Putin's recent comments about Finland, Sweden now, also Finland joining NATO?
Well, every year, Vladimir Putin makes a kind of State of the Union address. This year, 2 hours long, often longer than that, in which he rambles on about all his priorities and tries to make like he's actually, the head of a government as opposed to a kind of dictator who determines everything himself. And, there periodically the hundreds of people who are in the room stand up and applaud him. And this year, he made some statements about, how Russia is defending itself in Ukraine. And if the West provokes, and he picked up on the comments of Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, who had said maybe France would even send troops into Ukraine.
Yeah, that was pretty ballsy.
Yeah,
or stupid.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there have been a lot of red lines that we've tested with Russia, and needless to say, Putin said, well, we would retaliate against that. And, people thought, oh my God, he's got his finger on the nuclear button. That's the only card he's got to play. He's, when the Ukrainian army has funding, he's losing to it.
Is it that simple?
Well, not simple, but half of his combat capability of his entire army, which once was thought to be the second most powerful in the world, is gone. Right. 125,000 people are dead. 200 and some odd thousand people are injured. He's depleted hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, carrying forward this war, which is in its 10th year. The lines have changed a little bit recently because Ukraine has run out of ammunition because we haven't been providing them with funding. But, they haven't made any substantial gains in the past couple of years. They've lost some ground. They've lost a ton of their Black Sea fleet. They've lost a lot of airplanes. They've lost a lot of capabilities. And, they're forced to get ammunition from North Korea. Half of the ammunition doesn't work. You saw the story in the New York Times. They're conning people in India to come to Russia, and then they send them to the front lines in Ukraine, so that they're running out of people to do that. And, Navalny's death, has produced today a demonstration. Thousands of Russians who know that they could go to jail for pretending, showing up in the street. And for each one of those thousands, as Bill Browder and others commented, there are thousands of others who are afraid to show up because they think they'll go to jail, but who feel the same way. So, Putin's in charge, but there are divisions within his country. His strategy of invading Ukraine has now expanded NATO. Finland and Sweden are now in. Ukraine has promised entry. And if the United States produces this money, and Europe has just okayed another 50 billion euros, and some European countries are committing to this indefinitely. Estonia has just said it will give 0.25% of its GDP to Ukraine in perpetuity if they need it. Denmark has said, you can have all of our weapons and ammunition. We're not using them. So that, Europeans are stepping up. It's been a disaster for Putin, even if the wind has been at his back for the past couple of months because Mike Johnson and the MAGA Republicans have been withholding aid.
I think it's likely then. I'm going to say it's likely that they're going to actually be able to get that funding passed through the House. And I don't think it'll be that controversial. As we say
in the foreign policy business, knock wood.
Okay. I didn't know that was exclusive. But
yeah, no, it's a foreign policy term.
I had no idea. Let's go to the Middle East. You've got a piece at the Daily Beast about Biden and Netanyahu. Biden and Netanyahu both hope the other one is out of power soon. The dysfunctional relationship between two leaders has gotten so bad they're both imagining a near future where they can work with the other's successor. Can it be possible that Bibi Netanyahu is carrying on this military invasion and occupation of Gaza for his own personal security and political aspirations to literally keep him out of jail and in office? What is the public opinion on him? In
Israel, I think that's the view of many, many people. It's the view of many Israelis I've spoken to. It's the view of some of the Israelis who I have on my podcast or who I've written with. And, I think he recognizes that the minute his tenure as prime minister is over, he's in deep political water, deep legal hot water. I mean, much the same way Trump feels that way. and they're sort of running for their lives, or in the case of Netanyahu, prolonging this war. And so, Netanyahu has said, well, even if there's a ceasefire, we're going to go into Rafah after that. And even if we go into Rafah after that, we're going to then have to occupy Gaza for a period, and we're, going to be in charge, and blah, 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 blah. All of that is shorthand for saying, I'm going to stay in charge. And nobody has stood up to him. Now, something interesting has happened in that regard, and that is apparently one of the members of his war cabinet, who is a former opponent of his, who's a former head of the Israeli Defense Forces, Benny Gantz, has decided he's going to come to Washington this weekend. And Netanyahu apparently had a bit of a meltdown today and was like, there's only one prime minister of Israel, and he doesn't have my permission to come. And Gantz is seen as a potential alternative to Netanyahu. Now, his views on Gaza and a Palestinian state are not dramatically different from those of Netanyahu.
Right.
So anybody who's expecting night and day change from the Israelis, should sort of adjust their expectations, which was the purpose of my article. I mean, the purpose of my article was to say the U.S. has been hoping Netanyahu's going to disappear. Netanyahu's been hoping Biden's going to disappear. Everybody's been hoping that there might be some kind of hostage deal and a ceasefire, and that'll last long enough that we can put an end to this war and move forward into some kind of a more stable, peaceful situation in which, fewer lives are being lost each day. None of those things are going to happen. Netanyahu is going to be around for a while. I think, knock wood, spit, Biden is going to win. So Biden is going to be around for a while. And I think that even if there is some kind of hostage deal and some kind of ceasefire, that because of all the things you said, Netanyahu is going to, and the far right lied to Netanyahu, members of his cabinet, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and the others, they're all going to push to keep this conflict going.
Well, that doesn't bode well for the conflict, for sure, much less the relationship between the U.S. and Israel's leadership. But you write, Netanyahu must come to understand that if his goals and policies diverge from those of the U.S., we will not support them. Biden should make the case for America's approach directly to the people of Israel, much as Netanyahu has done in the past to the U.S. I remember that when he came and addressed Congress, much to President Obama's chagrin and like a real stick in the eye. You say the U.S. should actively work in all available forums to seek a lasting ceasefire and a realistic path to Palestinian and Israeli security, whether our approaches are embraced by the Israeli government or not. Do you think that could happen? I do like the news that I just saw before you joined me, that they've announced, the administration is, that they're going to deliver humanitarian aid to Palestinians, apparently without Israel.
I mean, 500,000 Palestinians out of 2 million in Gaza are at imminent risk of starvation. The risk of famine has struck Gaza, according to the UN, more rapidly than any area that has been affected by famine in modern memory.
That's crazy. Wow. I hadn't heard that.
And, the reason you had this tragedy yesterday, provoked one way or another by the Israelis, of these people desperate for flour and food, who then were fired upon, and then 100 died and 700 were injured, or fought for the food and then were fired upon, or, the Israeli approach to this whole thing is, we didn't do it, they did it, it's Hamas's fault. If it's not Hamas's fault, then we didn't mean to shoot them. If we did mean to shoot them, we didn't mean to shoot that many, and they were going through all this kind of bullshit. The reality is the people are starving because the food isn't getting to them, and the food isn't getting to them because the Israelis aren't letting the food get to them. And yes, Hamas is terrible, but as Admiral Jim Stavridis said wisely on MSNBC earlier today, when a military invades a region, they're responsible for the people of that region. And if they don't take care to ensure that those people, get food, get water, are treated with a certain degree of respect, then it's on them. He called it, Colin Powell's Pottery Barn rule. If you broke it, you own it. And that's absolutely right. And nobody in the world accepts that what happened yesterday was the fault of anybody but Israel. And the United States is beyond frustrated. And doing this airdrop is an absolute sign that our conversations with the Israelis have broken down. Because our conversations with the Israelis was let truckloads of aid in. And the truckloads of aid aren't getting there fast enough. And the Israelis aren't doing what they should do. And they're not letting the United Nations, UNRWA, do what they should do. And so now we're saying, okay, well, we're going to go around, over your head, literally, drop it in on parachutes. And I wouldn't be surprised if the suggestion, which some people have had, of U.S. sending a hospital ship happens, because Biden hates this. Secretary Blinken hates it. Everybody in the United States government hates what is happening to the Palestinian people. They have some culpability, not a small amount, a big amount of culpability. They made a mistake in backing Netanyahu and providing too much latitude, to the extent that there are now 30,000 dead, half of whom are women and children, and 60, 70,000 injured. And the broad consensus is that's an undercount, and that there are a large number of people under the rubble. And, I think it's not only horrific, but I think this is a stain on Israel's international reputation and standing that will take a generation to be removed, if they started to remove it today.
Now, yeah.
Wow. If tens of thousands of people starve to death, they may never recover.
That is quite a thing to say. And the idea of a hospital ship would seemingly be a really important gesture for the United States.
Well, it would be, but it would be a gesture. There are 2 million people there. The hospital ship would deal with a couple hundred of them. But it would be something.
What's that hospital ship?
It's time for the world to step up. I think, but part of this aid package is $10 billion for Israel. I wouldn't give it to them. I'd say, guys, there's got to be ceasefire. There's got to be humanitarian aid. This phase is done. You've gotten as much of Hamas as you're going to get. We've got to focus on rebuilding. We've got to focus on a Palestinian state. Either you're with us on this or you're on your own. You're not getting our support, and we will oppose you in international institutions, and we will work with regional players to ensure that there's no further normalization, and so on. I mean, this has gone too far. And it was clear. You and I talked about this in, days after October 7th.
Yeah.
And I said to you then, and I think you were responsive to that, you can't give a blank check to the Israelis.
Right.
It's not that they don't have a right to defend themselves. They do. It's not that what happened on October 7th was not horrific, and that Hamas is a terrorist group that does not deserve to exist. All those things are true. But there's no excuse for killing innocent Palestinians. And what has happened is much worse. Because I remember the thing I wrote on October 8th about this, or 9th, what I wrote was, what's the number? Is it 10,000? Is it 20,000? Is it 30,000? Well, we're at 30,000 now. And within a couple of weeks, if we don't deal with this famine thing, we're going to be at 50,000.
All right. I'm not going to add anything to that, because I think it's a powerful commentary that you just provided and given a lot of context and importance to what's happening there. And as you have been since this happened, and even before, obviously. So I really appreciate that. I do want to come back home and spend the last few minutes talking with you about your important piece at the Daily Beast, just published, which is why I'm happy to drop this conversation with you right away, because I think it's so important, so relevant, about the Supreme Court getting a lot of attention. A lot of people everybody should be reading this. Supreme Court picks up where the January 6th mob left off, just like the Capitol rioters. SCOTUS right wing is actively trying to help Trump illegitimately get back into the White House. And you really make the case that they are caping for the disgraced former president. They're kicking the can down the road, that this is political. This court is political. And I'd argue it always has been. But go ahead and tell folks
well, it has been for a long time. And I make the point in the story that, our lives all changed when the right wing of the Supreme Court decided to engage itself in the 2000 election and say that the people of Florida could not continue counting their ballots, that everything was over, and they were deciding on the favor of George W. Bush. It was political. It began the damage to the reputation of the court. And although only one member of the current court served on that court at that time, Clarence Thomas, the most corrupt justice in American history, 3 members of the current court were part of the Bush legal team: Chief Justice John Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. And so, the origins of this court were that kind of political meddling by the far right. It's all part of a plan. If you read books like Jane Mayer's Dark Money and these other books, it was all part of a plan to take the court over. And we have seen a whole series of hyper ideological arguments, even though periodically they would brush back Trump and so forth. But, look at the net effect of their arguments in Citizens United, which essentially said, if you got a lot of money, you're going to have more power in the United States. Right. Or Shelby County, which said, we're not going to enforce the Voting Rights Act anymore because we're over racism in America. Or the Heller decision or the Brune decisions, which expanded gun rights. Or, of course, the Dobbs decision, which took away Roe v. Wade, or the decision which gutted affirmative action. These are all ideological agenda items. And you've had a couple of cases on the Trump thing where Clarence Thomas did not recuse himself, right, even though his wife was one of the agitators working behind the scenes on the Trump coup, which is just astonishing.
It is.
And now you come to this decision. And, people may say, well, they just agreed to hear this immunity thing. And a lot of people don't think that it's going to be approved. Well, in the first instance, from a legal perspective, they shouldn't have agreed. There is no immunity guaranteed to president in the Constitution. In fact, the whole damn reason we fought the Revolutionary War was to say nobody was above the law, that we will not have kings. And what Trump is saying is, if I'm in charge, I'm the king. And he literally came up in the trial or the hearing in the D.C. Court of Appeals. Could the president therefore take SEAL Team 6 and have it murder his opponents? And Trump's attorney said, well, yes, under our interpretation, he could do that.
Yeah, that was the moment.
And, that court then came out with a decision, 38 pages, absolutely expertly argued, totally thorough decision, which, demolished this argument. Should have been over then. Supreme Court should have said, that's right. But they didn't do that. So what did they do that was political? What they did that was political was give Trump what he wanted, which was time. They gave him a delay, and the delay was real significant. The delay was, we're going to hear this the week of April 22nd. They probably would not reach a decision on it if they follow their traditional ways. And if you listen to people like Judge Ludwig, they probably will not reach a decision on it until the end of June. Well, that Judge Tanya Chutkan, who's in charge of this trial of Trump for election interference, has said he's got essentially 3 more months, 88 days of preparatory time once this case is resolved. So say it's July 1st, July, August, September. So now it's October 1st when this trial starts, if there are no more delays. But there will be more delays. Right. Could be that the court says, well, you're going to have to go and have a hearing to determine what is an official act and what is an unofficial act of the presidency. Because under official acts, he may have some immunity, but on unofficial acts, he may not, or illegal acts, he may not. Well, if that's another round of hearings, then where we're going to be is after this case begins in October or November. Well, the case is supposed to go 3 months. Well, October, November, that means November, December, January. It means that you would not have a verdict until after the whoever wins in November 2024 is elected. Now, that's got 2 consequences. On the one hand, it means voters will not know whether a jury of their peers has found the president guilty of leading a coup attempt of trying to steal the election, which seems like a salient point to know prior to an election. Or Trump will win, and he, as he has said, he will eliminate all of these cases.
Right. Sure.
He will eliminate these prosecutions. He will get away with it. And what the court will have done will be exactly what the rioters on January 6th attempted to do, which is interfere with the government, keep Trump in power, carry forward the goals of the coup. My final point, and sorry to go on at some length about this, is that the court knew this, and they had many options in how they responded. The first time they were asked to rule on this was in December by Jack Smith.
Yeah, Jack Smith went straight to him and said, please, let's get it done with.
They didn't do it. The decision was handed down by the D.C. Circuit on February 6th. At that moment, when there was an appeal within 24 hours, they could have said, we're not accepting the appeal. We're going to stick with the D.C. Circuit's opinion. But say they wanted to accept it, even though there is no legal basis to do that, they could have accepted it within 24 hours if they wanted to. They could have said, we're going to have the hearing on this within 2 or 3 days, because the exigent circumstances, the need of the American people for a speedy trial, the need of the American people to know, requires that we do this. How do I know we can do that? Well, go all the way back to Bush v. Gore in December of the year 2000. And they decided to take the case, heard arguments, and reached a decision in 3 days. So they could have done this in 3 days, too, if they wanted to.
And I think there's further precedent. I think the Pentagon Papers case was heard pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, and the U.S. v. Nixon case was heard in a matter of weeks and so forth, right? So the point here is that the court, with their eyes wide open, with countless options available to them, said, we're going to choose the option that makes it likely that the voters don't hear the results of this case until after the election. And that's playing politics. And we have to recognize that when we may complain that Trump is trying to take over the executive branch, that MAGA has taken over the House, that there's nut jobs in the Senate like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and so forth. But the place that was really taken over and politicized by the far right, the branch of our government that has been most corrupted with the most lasting circumstances, is the Supreme Court of the United States.
Yes. And people need to understand that is why presidential elections matter.
Because all these people have lifetime appointments.
Ridiculous. You write, it's a dark irony. They have chosen to hear the Department of Justice case against Donald Trump for election interference. In a way, that itself is election interference. Crazy.
Look, it is. And we should be afraid. You know, it shouldn't immobilize us. It should mobilize us. We shouldn't just be angry. We should go out and do something about it.
That's right.
But essentially what they've said is the court is not going to save you. The actions of DOJ are not going to save you. There is only one action you can take to preserve democracy and the rule of law in the United States of America, and that is get out and vote, work for Joe Biden, donate money, work for Democrats, make sure that in November that the MAGA Republican Party is defeated by an amount that is high enough that they can't steal it back in the states where they have some kind of control. And, you know, that we have to realize that we have to just sort of remind ourselves that in our system of government, even these people who work in these big buildings made out of marble are not atop that system of government. Even a court that says it's the Supreme Court, or a president who's the chief executive, the commander-in-chief, they're not atop our system of government. Voters are atop our system of government.
I've decided to start a new initiative called Pick a State. There's like 4 states that really matter.
6 or 7, but yeah.
So pick a state and focus on it, all your energy. I'm going to go live in one of those states, I think, for a couple of weeks.
Well, it's a good idea. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia are the 6 to pick.
Yeah. I think Arizona's going to be too hot for me in the summer.
Well, that's your forebears went and fought in D-Day, but you don't want to have a bad hair day. I'm telling you, you're going to have you have a bad hair day every day.
Real low blow, real cheap shot. Before I let you go with that cheap shot, what are your concerns about what happened in Michigan? Do you have concerns about what happened in Michigan this past week with the primary and a lot of people being motivated by what's happening?
I think we should be concerned because I think the stakes are so high. So I don't think we should take anything for granted. I think we should pay attention to the fact that uncommitted won more than half the votes in Dearborn, Michigan, a city that has an Arab American and Muslim American majority population. I think we need to hear that. Yeah. I think we need to understand, both in a domestic political sense and also in a foreign policy sense, the devastating toll that this bad policy in Israel-Gaza has had, and that it could cost us Michigan, which in the past has been a very close state. But having said that, as bad as Israel-Gaza has been, Biden's been a good president. Trump was a bad president. Biden made the economy work. Trump made it not work. Trump was the president behind the Muslim ban. Trump has said he wants to do that all over again. Trump has said he wants to take immigrants and put them into concentration camps. Trump has said he wants to put his opponents in jail or worse. And so it's not in a vacuum. And hopefully these people will not choose the couch, and they will recognize that as in a democracy, sometimes you disagree with the leader, but the first order of business is preserving the democracy. And I hope the way that works out it works out as good. But I would suggest, if Georgia's too hot or Arizona's too hot for you, go to Michigan.
Yeah, maybe Michigan or North Carolina. Maybe Pennsylvania, it's close.
All those places are going to matter.
Well, I worry about my dog, though. I wonder if I should do anything at all.
You should bring your dog with you. No, they would love the dog.
Democracy.
In fact, people tend to like dogs more than they like people.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I mean, Trump hates dogs. Trump is the anti-dog president. Trump is the only president in modern memory who did not have a pet.
Is that right? Biden's dog hates people.
Biden's dog hates the Secret Service.
Oh, specifically.
And based on what we know about the Secret Service, I would have
There's
to
some
say
bad apples.
that Biden's dog may have some good judgment. And so I'm gonna err and give the benefit of the doubt in the direction of Commander and whatever those dogs are.
Very
called.
risky take here at the end. David Rothkopf, you've done it again. Thank you very much for joining me today. As always, really poignant and persuasive.
David Rothkopf, you've done it again. You've worn out your welcome. Go away.
No, not at all. I usually go less time with you. I usually don't take as much time. It's a Friday afternoon we're talking. I want to turn this around and get it out because there's a lot of relevant issues I think people are going to want to hear.
Well, it's nice to talk to you on a Friday afternoon. I hope you have an excellent weekend.
You too, buddy. Thank you. All right. Love talking to Rothkopf. Love it, love it. Go check him out at Deep State Radio. Get his book, follow him on social media, and listen to the podcast. Hope you appreciated this extra bonus. Try to do, actually, Saturday show every week, but I've missed the last few. So I think I'll probably drop this Friday evening, actually, because I want to get it out there for you to listen to whenever you want, as soon as I get it done, and then I will rest. On the 8th day, he rested. You guys are the best. Can't wait to see you in Vegas. If I'm going to see you bumblebees, I love you. Hope you appreciated this. Go let Rothkopf know that you did on Twitter. He'll see it. And thank you. John Carroll taking us out as always.
Keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. They knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand.